Hello, and welcome to Cracked Love Chronicles. The roar of the helicopter blades above me was deafening, yet it was a sound I had grown to cherish. It signified that we were en route to our next mission. I had flown in and out of these rugged mountains more times than I could count, but each time brought a rush, a thrilling excitement in my gut, knowing what awaited us. This was our job. This was our life. The sun began to dip behind the jagged peaks, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. I was focused, scanning the horizon with intent. With one eye on the radio and the other on the shifting terrain beneath us, our team was positioned in a secluded area where every rock could conceal an enemy sniper. We had a mission to accomplish. Chopper 6, you're clear to land. The voice crackled over the comms as we approached the drop zone, readying ourselves for action. Everything unfolded in a whirlwind. One moment we were gliding smoothly, the mission progressing as planned, and the next, a blinding flash erupted, followed by the gut-wrenching crunch of metal and a thunderous explosion the Stinger missile had struck. Hit the tail rotor. I didn't hear the impact, but I felt the jolt, a sensation of freefall as the chopper dipped to the left. My heart slammed against my chest, and I felt the world spinning as everything inside the cabin shook violently. Instinct kicked in. I grabbed the straps of my seatbelt and yanked it off, throwing myself into action. My mind was a blur, but I knew I had to stay calm. I had a team to save. My legs screamed with pain as I struggled to stand, but there was no time to focus on that. The chopper was going down, and the enemy was. As we approached the end, we managed to stabilize, but the harm had already been inflicted. The rotor was beyond repair, and we had no choice but to make an emergency landing in a valley encircled by treacherous terrain. Dust and debris swirled around us, and for a fleeting moment, silence enveloped everything, broken only by the persistent ringing in my ears. I was the first to emerge from the wreckage. My right leg throbbed as if struck by a sledgehammer, yet it remained intact. At least that was a small mercy. I pushed myself to my feet, each step a painful reminder of our predicament, but my thoughts remained focused. Reach the team. The helicopter may have been down, but our mission was far from finished. The squad was rattled, some injured, others disoriented, but there was no moment to assess the situation. Gunfire erupted from the hills, flashes illuminating the distance as enemy shots rained down, closing in on our position. They were poised, anticipating our demise from the crash. Form up, we're moving. I commanded, my voice unwavering despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Time was of the essence. They would be on us soon. I seized the nearest rifle, my fingers slick with sweat, and began advancing toward the high ground, my unit rallying beside me. We had to eliminate those intent on our destruction. We battled our way up the ridge, using the terrain as our shield, the crack of bullets echoing too close for comfort. My right leg felt like it was lagging behind, but adrenaline propelled me forward. The pain was insignificant compared to the fierce determination to protect my men. Outnumbered, I was acutely aware of our disadvantage, yet we refused to surrender without a struggle. I crouched behind a boulder, striving to steady my breath as I aimed and fired, witnessing the enemy drop one by one. My heart raced, but I couldn't afford to dwell on that. We had to secure the area. We had to endure. It felt like an eternity before we finally gained control of the position. By then, I could hardly bear weight on my leg, and my vision blurred from exhaustion and blood loss. Yet, I pressed on. My team's survival was all that mattered. We had to return to base, but waiting for extraction was too risky with the enemy still lurking. When the extraction chopper finally arrived, I was the last one on board. My leg had given out. My body felt on the brink of collapse, yet I summoned the strength to pull myself into the chopper. We made it, just barely. The ride back was a haze of pain and exhaustion. The battle had ended for me, but not for everyone. We had lost good men that day, and their faces haunted my thoughts. The injury to my leg was severe enough for them to discharge me shortly after. The limp I now carried would never fully fade, but it was not that which lingered in my mind. What remained was the understanding that I had witnessed men at their worst, yet I had also seen them at their best. I had witnessed the true essence of loyalty, sacrifice, and brotherhood, and I had lived through it all. I emerged from that war with a body marked by scars, yet my spirit remained unbroken. I never spoke of it, not to anyone, not to Melissa, not to the guys back at the station, and certainly not to the doctors or therapists they assigned me after my return. What was there to say? I felt as though I had been robbed of something significant. I had this job, this purpose, and then one damn missile, just one, and suddenly everything shifted. That limp, the ache in my leg, that sensation of no longer being the person I once was lingered with me each morning. What options did I have? I could have exerted more effort, battled through the discomfort, perhaps discovered a means to remain engaged longer. Instead, I found myself here, back in a life I felt unworthy of. The house was silent, too silent. Melissa thrived on the commotion, her vibrant spirit illuminating every space, transforming even the most mundane instances into something significant. But that was in the past. Now, I could sense it in her gaze, as if I had become a shadow of my former self. A stranger, or worse, a disappointment. She always aspired to the best for herself, and I couldn't fault her for that. She deserved it. She toiled to ensure we had the finest things: clothes, cars, the house, creating a life that made others look at us and say we had it all. She thrived on that admiration, that visibility. But now, she could hardly bear my constant presence. I was no longer the man she married, the one engaged in something significant, something that resonated with her. I had become just a guy who limped around the house and gazed out the window as she prepared for another night out with her friends. "Ian, are you just going to sit there all day?" Melissa's voice sliced through the quiet one afternoon. I hadn't even noticed how long I'd been perched on the couch, lost in thought. The TV flickered in the background, but it held no interest for me. My mind wandered aimlessly, unable to latch onto anything for long. I hesitated before responding, fully aware of her expectations. She wanted me to be engaged, to join her, to embody the man I used to be. Yet, I felt distant, disconnected. It felt as if I could no longer be that man, not after all I had witnessed, all I had done. She pivoted sharply, her frustration evident as she snatched her purse from the table. "You don't even care anymore, do you? This isn't the life I signed up for. I thought you'd be different when you came home, but here you are, just sitting and wasting away." Her words pierced through me, sharper than any bullet could. I understood her pain. She hadn't signed up for a husband who couldn't keep pace with her. She craved the thrill, the journey, the vibrant life, and I had stopped offering it. It wasn't as straightforward as that, I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper, hoping to avoid conflict. But the moment had passed. The air was heavy with unspoken words, like a tempest poised to unleash. "It's not that simple," I countered. "You've been here for months, doing nothing but obstructing my path." Her words cut deep, yet I understood they stemmed from her own pain, even if I felt lost in how to connect with her. "I can't continue this way." I stood up, suddenly aware of every ache in my body, every scar from the war. My leg throbbed with pain, but I pushed through it. "I didn't ask for this, either, Melissa. I didn't ask to come back here and feel like I don't belong in my own home." "Well, maybe you don't." Her voice cracked, and I saw something in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time: desperation. "I don't know who you are anymore, or Ian. You used to be someone who was out there making a difference. Now you're just here, moping around, pretending like the world doesn't exist." I felt an overwhelming urge to express everything that was consuming me, yet the words eluded me. My thoughts were tangled in memories from Afghanistan, the faces of those who never returned, the weight of guilt for not doing enough. I struggled to be the person she deserved, especially on days when I couldn't confront my own reflection. "I'm trying," I murmured, uncertain if my efforts were for her or simply a means to maintain my own sanity. I was lost, unsure of how to mend this, and I felt a disconnect, as if she didn't grasp what I truly needed from her. She shot back, her voice breaking. "You don't see me anymore. You don't see our son. You just sit there in your own little world." Our son, he was the one thing that still got through to me. His smile, his laughter, he was the one thing in this whole mess that still felt real. But even with him, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was failing him, failing all of us. I had tried to be the husband she wanted, the soldier I once was, but it felt like I was losing myself. No matter how hard I fought to get back, I couldn't find that man again. Every fight, being with Melissa felt like I was drifting further from the person I was meant to be. Each argument left me questioning whether I was still the man I once was, or merely a shadow of my former self. After a long silence, I blurted out, Maybe we need a break. The words escaped before I could hold them back. Maybe I need a break. She didn't respond immediately, just stared at me, her expression hardening, eyes narrowing. The disappointment in her was palpable, striking me like a punch to the gut. Fine, she finally said, her voice icy. Maybe you do. The distance between us expanded like an ocean, isolating me from the love we once shared. I understood that things couldn't remain this way, yet I was at a loss for how to mend it. The war had stripped away so much from me, and now it felt as though it was claiming my family as well. It had been a few weeks since the altercation with Melissa, and the situation at home showed no signs of improvement. The persistent tension was exhausting me. I realized I needed to take action, to escape that house, to find relief from the noise, the judgment, the guilt. I could no longer endure it. Feeling like I had lost my way, I began searching for work. Uncertain about what I truly wanted, I craved something that would restore my sense of purpose, the one thing I missed most after returning home. The feeling that my actions held significance was absent, especially with Melissa's constant reminders of how much I had changed. I needed an outlet, a distraction from the chaos around me. That's when I stumbled upon the ad for the security contractor position. The company was small, local, and seemed to offer just what I was looking for. It didn't appear to be anything overly extravagant, but I recognized this was my opportunity. I possessed the skills and the experience. I had endured trials in combat, orchestrated operations, and managed teams while ensuring security. These were all tasks I had mastered over years in the military. I simply needed to demonstrate that I still had what it took. As I entered the office, I encountered James Thompson, the owner. He was a straightforward man, clad in a plain suit, with eyes that seemed to reflect a wealth of experience. When I handed him my resume, he barely reacted, merely scanning it before locking his gaze onto mine. Eyeing me, he asked about my time in Iraq and Afghanistan, already anticipating my response. Yeah, I replied, I've got the experience. I know how to handle pressure, lead teams, and get the job done. Without missing a beat, he said, you're hired. You start tomorrow as head of operations. The pay is good. You won't regret it. I was taken aback just like that, no lengthy interview or tests. He simply saw what was on paper and trusted it. Perhaps it was my military background or something else entirely, but I didn't care. I had a job, a real job, and I wouldn't be stuck at home anymore. Each day, my life seemed to fall apart a little more. Yet, the following morning, I reported for duty and was handed the reins of the operations side. It was a significant responsibility, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt a rush of vitality. There were challenges to tackle, plans to implement, and teams to guide. This work sharpened my focus and made me feel like I was part of something greater. And the paycheck? It exceeded my expectations, more than enough to manage my bills while I navigated the chaos at home. For the first time in ages, I felt a sense of direction returning. There were no persistent doubts echoing at home, no one undermining my value, and no reminders of my limitations at work. I felt in control, filled with purpose, and it was exhilarating. It didn't take long for me to settle into the flow at the security company. Initially, I concentrated on managing operations, scheduling, and overseeing teams to ensure everything functioned seamlessly. However, it wasn't long before I encountered challenges that required more from me, situations that reminded me of the reasons behind my hiring. The role encompassed more than mere paperwork and checklists. It revolved around ensuring safety and preventing situations from spiraling out of control when the stakes were elevated. The first incident occurred roughly 6 months into my new position, where we had a contract with a local bank to enhance security during overnight hours, and I was in charge of the patrol team. One night, I received a call from one of the guards who had observed something unusual. 2 men in a van parked on the street, simply watching the building. Subtle, but I had learned to trust my instincts. I asked him to keep an eye on them and drove over to see for myself. When I got there, I parked across the street and watched. Sure enough, the men didn't seem like they were just hanging out. They were wearing heavy coats even though it wasn't that cold, and they kept looking around nervously. I could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something wasn't right. I called James to alert him and then contacted the local authorities, but I didn't want to wait around for them to arrive. I grabbed a couple of the security staff, and under the cover of darkness, we quietly approached the van. By the time the cops arrived, we had the 2 men on the ground, their hands cuffed behind their backs. They had been planning to rob the bank's vault and were waiting for the right moment to strike. My quick thinking, getting them before they even made a move, had saved the day. The authorities were impressed, but honestly, I didn't think it was anything special, just another day doing what I knew I had to do. A few months later, it happened again. At a new location, we were tasked with overseeing security for a local jeweler. I received a report indicating that one of the cameras had malfunctioned. Without delay, I dispatched a team to investigate the premises while I made my way there. On my approach, I intercepted a radio transmission regarding a suspicious vehicle parked outside the store. Upon arrival, I spotted a black sedan across the street, with a man in a ski mask seated in the passenger seat. The atmosphere felt tense, and I decided not to take any risks. I contacted the police and also requested backup. Our team established a perimeter around the store, ensuring that no one could enter or exit without our awareness. Within minutes, a second man emerged from the alley, heading directly for the jewelry store's back entrance. I was already in motion, confronting him and drawing my weapon just in case. My military training kicked in instinctively. To sum it up, we apprehended both individuals attempting to break in, and they never got close to the store's vault. The police arrived shortly after, and I provided them with a brief account of the situation. An overview of the situation, my heart raced, yet there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing I had thwarted another potential crime. The third incident was particularly noteworthy. A few months back, we were assigned to secure a transport truck loaded with cash from a local bank. The route was planned meticulously, and everything appeared to be in order, but an unsettling feeling lingered. The driver was behaving oddly, fidgeting and frequently glancing in the rearview mirror. I understood the importance of trusting my instincts, so I decided to alter the route. At the last moment, a few turns were altered, and sure enough, as soon as the truck took its detour, two vehicles began tailing it, driving aggressively in an attempt to box it in. They had anticipated that no one would catch on. I was monitoring the route remotely, witnessing everything unfold in real time. I called the driver, instructing him to remain calm and follow my orders. The backup I had arranged arrived within minutes, allowing us to intercept the robbers before they could act. The driver was shaken but unharmed, and the cash was secured. The criminals were caught off guard, completely unaware of what was coming. They were apprehended immediately, and I received various accolades for my swift decision-making. Yet, it felt far from remarkable. I was merely fulfilling my duties, relying on the skills I had developed through experience. My greatest asset was my capacity to remain composed in tense situations, to think quickly and respond before chaos ensued. I had wished for a change in my relationship with Melissa after everything that had happened, hoping she might perceive me differently. For a fleeting moment, I entertained that thought. She might finally grasp that I wasn't merely a guy trapped in a monotonous routine, idly watching life unfold outside my window. The acknowledgement I received for halting those crimes should have resonated with her, but when I shared it, her response was far from what I anticipated. She listened, yes, but it lacked the depth that would make me feel recognized, that would instill a sense of pride in my achievements. There wasn't even a hint of congratulations. It felt as though she was hearing me without truly engaging. I could sense her thoughts drifting elsewhere. Somewhere else. Her eyes flitted around, not truly focused on me, not really present. It stung more than I expected. "That's great," she said, almost offhandedly, as if trying to be supportive, but her voice didn't quite convey it. "At least you're doing something now." Something about that line felt wrong. It felt like a dismissal, as if what I had done didn't really matter to her. I waited for her to ask more questions, to show some genuine interest in the fact that I had prevented not one, but 3 major crimes. But there was nothing, just silence, a few more murmurs about her day, and a quick subject change. It hurt. It really did. I kept trying to tell myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't doing this for her approval, that I was doing it for me. But I couldn't shake the feeling of disappointment. Maybe I was fooling myself, thinking that my actions would make a difference in how she saw me. It wasn't just about the job or the recognition. It was about feeling like I mattered to her, like I still had value in her eyes. And when she didn't show, when she seemed indifferent to the things that brought me joy, it left me questioning everything. Was I merely a background character in her story? Was she so absorbed in her own existence that she overlooked my efforts and aspirations? I didn't seek her praise, but a hint of recognition would have been appreciated. Instead, I felt like a ghost to her, as if she had already moved on in her thoughts, leaving behind the person who once fought for our shared future, the man she no longer seemed to care for. That pain cut deeper than anything I had anticipated. I had been mulling it over for some time. Something felt off. The silence at dinner, the way our conversations had dwindled, and the palpable distance growing between us, it all weighed heavily on my mind. The absence of intimacy was the most challenging aspect. I couldn't recall the last moment we truly connected. It frustrated me, this feeling of becoming strangers cohabiting the same space. That day, I decided to leave work early, promising myself I would carve out the time to address it with her. Feeling the weight of the moment, I knew it was time to confront the truth. I couldn't keep dodging the issue any longer, nor could I maintain the facade that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. As I entered the house, I found Melissa on the couch, absorbed in a magazine, the stillness around us amplifying the tension. She didn't acknowledge my presence at first. "Melissa, we need to talk," I said, striving for a composed tone, but the urgency seeped through. She looked up for a fleeting moment before setting the magazine aside, silence hanging heavily in the air as I stood there, waiting. There I stood for a moment, uncertain of how to begin. I understood that this conversation would be challenging, yet it was necessary. I felt that something was amiss between us. "We don't talk the way we used to," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's no real connection anymore, and I can't ignore it any longer." She remained silent at first, simply gazing at me. I noticed a flicker of recognition in her eyes, as if she understood the direction this was taking but was hesitant to confront it. "I'm talking about everything, Melissa," I continued. "The silence, the distance, and yes, it feels as though we've come to a standstill, and I can't pinpoint when or how it happened, but it's causing me pain. It seems like we've lost something that once held significance for both of us." Melissa crossed her arms and leaned back into the couch, her expression calm and detached. For a moment, it felt as if she wasn't even taking this conversation seriously. Then she broke the silence. "Well, I suppose now's as good a time as any to tell you that you're no longer what I want in my life. You used to be a physical specimen, but that's not the case anymore. You used to be a great cook, but that's long gone. You've just started earning again, and while that's nice, it's not enough. I wanted more out of life. I wanted a partner who could cook well, was physically exceptional, and financially secure. Since you don't fit the bill in any of those areas anymore, I made some changes, and since I couldn't find one person with all those qualities, I found three." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, but her tone remained unwavering even as she sat across from me, looking me directly in the eye. "You want the truth?" she asked. "Fine, there's a chef." "A chef?" I repeated, almost in disbelief. "Yes, he's an amazing cook, far better than you ever were," she said without hesitation. "Every meal he makes is like art. When I'm with him, I feel special, something you never managed to do in the kitchen. And yes, I had sex with him on the kitchen table, right there," she said, pointing to the table. I tried to process her words, but before I could respond, she continued, "And then there's a gym instructor." I shook my head slightly, struggling to keep up. "A gym instructor?" "Yes," she said, her voice unwavering. "He embodies everything you're not: muscular, fit, and strong. He does things to me that you have never done. He had me standing right here in this room, and you know what? My feet never touched the ground," she said with a wicked smile. My chest tightened as his anger began to bubble beneath the surface. In the third, her lips curled into a faint, almost smug smile. "A businessman. He's wealthy and powerful. He knows how to make things happen. Orion, when I'm with him, I feel important. He gives me the kind of life I've always wanted, the kind of life he could never provide." Just yesterday, he had sex with me in his Maybach. I stared at her, stunned into silence for a moment. "So that's it? You've replaced me with 3 men, one for every area you think I failed in?" She shrugged, her voice devoid of any remorse. "I needed more than you could offer, Orion. I wanted a man who could cook, a man who is physically exceptional, and one who could provide me with the lifestyle I deserve. Since you couldn't give me all that, I found others who could. Each of them gives me what you can't, and all of them are aware of it. Each other, and they are fine with sharing me with each other." I clenched my fists under the table, struggling to maintain my composure. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Since you were deployed in Afghanistan," she replied flatly. "You were gone, and I was lonely. I realized I deserved more and decided to go out and get it. Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. I wanted to shout, to let the anger take over, but instead, I took a deep breath and shook my head. After a long pause, I said the only thing that made sense. I took a deep breath and steadied my voice, looking her directly in the eye. It's time for a divorce. You've made a mockery of this marriage, and there's no coming back from that. The logical step is to end it. I'll grant you the divorce since you seem to have other men taken care of. I assume you won't need any financial support from me. As for our son, it's clear he doesn't factor into your desires. I'll be taking custody of Daniel. Melissa leaned back, crossing her arms with a smug expression, then let out a sharp laugh. A divorce? Just like that? Oh no, Orion, it's not going to be that easy. Her words caught me off guard, but before I could respond, she continued. I gave you a son, Orion. I had sex with you, stayed faithful for years, even when I didn't have to. That has some value, don't you think? Value? I repeated, disbelief clear in my voice. You think fidelity in a marriage is something you should be rewarded for when you've been unfaithful for years? She ignored my question entirely. I want 80% of your assets, and I want the house as well. I stood up, trying to keep my composure. Composure despite the storm brewing inside me. Melissa, I'll give you $50,000 and nothing else. Don't push your luck. Her smug smile turned into a cold glare. $50,000? She scoffed. You're being unreasonable. Orion, fine. If that's how you want to play this, I'll take Daniel. And you know what? I'll make him call all three of them Daddy the chef, the gym instructor, and the businessman. They'll all be better fathers to him than you ever could. Her words hit like a punch to the gut, but before I could respond, she leaned forward, her voice dripping with malice. With a sense of malice, I vowed to ensure Daniel understood daily that his father was the true villain, that she was merely a bad man who had destroyed everything. My jaw clenched as I fixed my gaze on her, anger surging with each word she uttered. But then she crossed a line I never thought she would dare to. If you push me too hard, she said, her tone chilling and calculated, I'll make you regret it. I'll file domestic abuse charges against you. You know how society views so-called warriors with PTSD. It wouldn't be difficult to persuade a court that you're unstable. I moved closer to her, my voice low and steady, each word heavy with meaning. Melissa, you're pursuing something beyond your grasp. You have until I pack my things and leave to rethink this. But know this, once I step through that door, there will be consequences. She leaned back, crossing her arms, a smirk playing at the corners of her lips. You think you can intimidate me? You're all talk. Go ahead, walk out. It won't alter a thing. I didn't respond. I turned on my heel and ascended the stairs. Only the sound of my footsteps echoed on the stairs, shattering the silence. I seized a duffel bag, hastily packing enough clothes for an extended absence. My hands moved swiftly, methodically, while my thoughts churned with a tumult of anger, disbelief, and an unexpected clarity. This was it. I wouldn't look back. As I descended the stairs, bags slung over my shoulder, I paused for a final glance at her. She sat on the couch, calm and indifferent, as if none of this mattered. Leaving so soon, she said mockingly. Good, now I can. I'll truly demonstrate my capabilities. You mean nothing to me, Ian. From this moment forward, you'll understand the consequences of crossing me. I will bring you down, and you'll regret ever challenging me. I chose silence, walking to the door, opening it, and stepping outside, allowing it to close behind me without a glance back. The moment I exited, Melissa picked up her phone, a triumphant smirk on her face, dialing swiftly. When the line connected, her voice transformed into a sweet, enticing tone. Brody, she purred, I've done it. I forced Orion out of the house. It's finally happening. Now, I need you to call. That lawyer you mentioned, I want the best. I want to ensure I come out on top. She paused, listening to his response before laughing softly. Of course, you're always so reliable. Let me know as soon as it's done. Hanging up, she immediately dialed another number. This time, her tone was playful, teasing Jason. Guess what? The house is all mine now, and I could use some company. Why don't you come over tonight? I need a workout. She laughed, a low, sultry sound. You're the only one who can help me with that. Ending the call, she sighed, scrolling through her contacts before hitting dial again. This time, her voice softened. taking on a tone of fondness. "Richard," she said warmly, "I was thinking about you. Let's make plans for tomorrow. You can cook for me again. You know how much I love it when you do." He walked into his boss's office, his face tight with determination. His boss looked up from his desk, sensing the tension. "Orion, everything all right?" his boss asked, concern evident in his tone. Orion exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "No, not really. I'm dealing with something personal, a mess with my wife. I need to take a week off to sort this out. I'll make up for the lost time once things are settled." His boss nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Take the time you need, just keep me updated." "All right, thank you," Orion said, his voice heavy. With that, he left and immediately headed to his lawyer friend, Donald Miller. Sitting across from Donald in his office, Ian recounted everything: Melissa's affairs, her threats, and her demands. Donald listened intently, with a somber expression. Donald leaned forward, his hands clasped on the desk as he spoke to Orion. "I'll be honest with you, divorce is unavoidable in this situation. Given the circumstances, Melissa will likely receive half of your assets. However, the more pressing concern is custody of Daniel. As a minor, the courts typically lean towards the mother in custody disputes, especially if she has been the primary caregiver. It's likely she will also secure the house, as Daniel requires a stable living environment." Orion's jaw tightened, his fists clenching in response. Clenching his jaw as he attempted to grasp the implications, he finally spoke, his voice low and tinged with anger. "So let me get this straight," he said, each word deliberate. "I'll be paying for her to have sex with her lovers in my house." Donald leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as he selected his words with care. "Orion," he began, his tone measured, "there's no legal way to sort this out where you come out unscathed. Legally, she's got the upper hand. The court systems, custody laws, they're all stacked in her favor." He paused, locking his gaze on him. Eyes fixed on Orion, Donald pressed on, emphasizing his next words. "There may be ways to handle this outside of legal channels. If managed properly, ensuring there's no trace or evidence linking you to anything, then perhaps the job could get done." Orion stared back, the gravity of the conversation settling in. He spoke slowly, his voice cold and calculating. "You're telling me there's no legal way to win this?" Donald nodded, his expression resolute. Orion exhaled sharply, leaning forward in his chair. "No problem," he replied. His voice steady, he said, "I'll call my friends." Donald leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Orion, the first thing you need to do is cut her finances, bleed her dry. That's something you can do legally. No court is going to fault you for spending your own money on essential services." Orion raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly do I do that?" Donald smirked, pulling out a small notepad. "I've got contacts, people who can provide service invoices that look legitimate. Repairs, consultations, whatever. You'll claim you needed the money to pay them off, but you need to act quickly. Every cent must vanish from your accounts today." Orion nodded, determination etching his features. "Fine, let's do it." Within minutes, Donald made the necessary calls, and Orion began transferring his liquid cash to various vendors. Each transaction was executed with precision, leaving no trace of hesitation. By evening, the task was complete. Orion met Donald in his office, a discreet black duffel bag in hand, filled with the recovered cash. "Here it is," Orion said, placing the bag down. "I'll leave this with you for now." I drove my car to the motel. As evening settled in, I felt the weight of the day pressing down on me, prompting a need for relief. I made my way to Mar, where the bar's soft lighting and gentle buzz created an inviting atmosphere for relaxation. Grace greeted me with her bright smile, and I took my place at the counter. She served my usual, and I cradled a glass of bourbon, savoring its warmth as it coursed through me. After a long day, all I sought was tranquility, yet it appeared that serenity was not in the cards for me that night when the door suddenly slammed open. Open, followed by a voice laced with venom. "There he is." Melissa's shrill tones sliced through the room like a blade. I didn't turn around. I simply closed my eyes for a brief moment and exhaled slowly. "You really thought you could clean out the accounts and walk away like some big man, didn't you, Orion?" she spat, her heels clicking against the wooden floor as she marched closer. I turned in my seat, glass still in hand, and took a calm sip before responding. "I had people to pay, Melissa. Bills don't vanish just because you've been playing house with your attache. Her face twisted in rage, but before she could respond, one of her entourage decided to play the hero. Jason McDonald, the gym rat she had been seeing, stormed up to me, his muscles straining against his too-tight t-shirt as he grabbed me by the collar. "You think you can disrespect her like that?" Jason growled, his face too close for comfort. I glanced down at his hand, then back up at him, calm as ever. "You might want to let go," I said flatly. He didn't, so I did what I had to. With a quick motion, I grabbed his wrist and he twisted it hard, and a high-pitched, pathetic sound yelped from him, echoing through the bar. "Let go," Jason squealed, his voice cracking. "Boy, you squeal like a girl," I remarked, releasing him. Jason stumbled back, cradling his wrist like a wounded animal. I noticed Richard, the chef, standing a few steps back. He looked like he wanted to intervene but thought better of it, a smart move. But then Brody, the businessman, decided to play the tough guy. He stepped forward, straightening his blazer as if he were walking into a boardroom. "This isn't over," Brody declared. His voice was steady, yet his eyes brimmed with misplaced confidence. "I'm going to rip you apart, Orion." I tilted my head, studying him for a moment. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise," Brody replied, stepping closer. Before he could react, my fist connected with his nose. The crunch was unmistakable. Brody staggered back, clutching his face as blood poured between his fingers. "Guess that didn't work out for you," I said, shaking out my hand. Melissa, red-faced and furious, stormed toward me, her hand shooting out, aiming for my face, but it never landed. The bartender, Grace, a no-nonsense woman who had witnessed it all, caught Melissa's wrist midair. Grace's grip was firm, her expression deadpan. "I don't think so," Grace said, her voice sharp. "I might not hit women, but I've got no such reservations. Trust me, I will rip that arm out and shove it at you. Your glory holds so deep that it will come out of your mouth." Melissa froze, her eyes darting around the room. That's when she noticed the shift in the bar. A few of the regulars, big guys who didn't take kindly to drama, were standing now. With arms crossed, I glared at her and her companions. "This isn't over. I will ensure that your son calls my boys daddy." Melissa hissed, but there was no conviction in her words. "No," I said, locking eyes with her. "It is. Now get out." She hesitated for a moment, her pride clearly wrestling with her better judgment, but then she turned on her heel and marched out, her lovers trailing behind like scolded dogs. As the door closed behind them, Grace let out a chuckle and poured me another bourbon. "Always entertaining when you're around, Ian," she said, sliding the drink my way. The glass was raised toward me, and I felt a sense of satisfaction in having provided the entertainment. I lifted my glass in a mock toast, and gradually, the bar resumed its familiar buzz. I settled back into my seat, reflecting on the night as I took another sip. The bar had thinned out, yet I lingered long after Grace had wiped down the counter and flipped the chairs. The bourbon burned as it slid down, a minor discomfort compared to the tempest brewing within me. Melissa, with her self-satisfied grin, the nerve of her to introduce those three jesters into my life, still believing. She had the right to humiliate me, that was one thing, but threatening to take my son and make him call her lover daddy. That crossed a line that no one, not even her, could afford to cross. For hours, I sat there, turning everything over in my mind. My first thought was to call the guys from the Marines, my old brothers in arms. They would pick up in a heartbeat, no questions asked. They had helped me once before, after all. They could scare the life out of Melissa and her lovers, maybe even put them in the hospital for a while. It would send a message. There was a message, certainly, but I wasn't oblivious. Melissa was not the type to be intimidated into compliance. She would flourish in that chaos, turning it into a narrative where she played both the victim and the villain. Even worse, she would find a way to weaponize it against me, potentially taking Daniel away, dragging me through the courts, and portraying me as the abusive ex-husband. It would be her word against mine, and I couldn't afford to lose my son. He was the only thing that mattered in this turmoil. By the time I left the bar and stepped into the frigid night air, my thoughts were still in a whirlwind, contemplating the idea of reaching out. Marines hovered around me, enticing, yet I understood that violence against her lovers wouldn't bring resolution. It wouldn't change her. I wandered the desolate streets, the faint buzz of the city my sole companion. My hands tightened and relaxed as the reality dawned on me. This conflict wouldn't resolve through dialogue or intimidation. It would culminate in violence. The notion sent a shiver down my spine, yet it also offered an unsettling clarity. As long as Melissa and her partners were involved, my life would be an unending struggle, and my son would be caught in the middle. Caught in the middle, never knowing peace. The thought struck me like a punch to the gut. Yet, I didn't flinch. Instead, I let it settle, let it take root. For the first time in years, I contemplated stepping into the darkness, doing something irreversible. Am I really going to do this? I muttered under my breath, halting in my tracks. The answer came almost immediately. A part of me, the part that had endured war, that had witnessed men commit unspeakable acts to survive, knew the answer. Yes. I couldn't afford to play. No longer the good guy. The system had failed me, and the courts turned a deaf ear, all thanks to Melissa. I had to embrace the role of the villain in this narrative. As I made my way home, my thoughts began to churn. A plan had yet to form, but I understood what was necessary. This wasn't driven by revenge or animosity. It was about survival, about safeguarding Daniel. By the time I arrived at my apartment, a sense of calm washed over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in weeks. The choice was made. Even if the specifics remained murky, I would step into the shadows if that was what it required. I would do what needed to be done. For Daniel, for peace. No turning back now. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone in my hand. My thumb hovered over the call button as sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. I took a deep breath, the weight of what I was about to do pressing heavy on my chest. Finally, I pressed the number. The line rang twice before a deep, familiar voice answered. "It's been a long time, my friend," came the smooth, measured tone. I couldn't help the faint smile that tugged at the corners of my mouth. "Yeah, it has Fuss Amigas 2012, that's the last time I saw you." "Ah, the good old days," the man replied, a trace of nostalgia in his voice. "How are you, Orion?" I let out a soft chuckle, though there wasn't much humor in it. "I've been better, and you?" "Major Gabriel Lopez, or should I say ex-major?" He laughed heartily, the sound familiar as the desert heat we'd endured together. "No longer a soldier of the country, my friend. These days, I run my own operation. You could say I've moved up in the world. Cartel boss has a nice ring to it." Both laughed, though the weight of unspoken understanding hung heavy in the air. "Figured as much," I said after a moment, wondering how long it would take for you to join your cousin's side. Lopez's voice took on a playful lilt. "What can I say? It runs in the blood." But I wasn't here for small talk. My tone turned serious, my grip tightening around the phone. "I've got a situation, Gabe, a bad one. My wife's been cheating on me with 3 different men: a chef, a gym instructor, and a businessman. She's trying to bleed me dry and take my son." The line fell silent for a brief moment, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Then Lopez broke the stillness, his voice unwavering and composed. "That's tough, my friend, but I think I know someone who can assist. My brother deals with those situations." A shiver coursed through me at his statement, delivered with a confidence that only someone like Lopez could possess. "Thanks, Gabe," I murmured softly. He offered little more, just a final word of caution before disconnecting. I lingered in the quiet of the kitchen, the silence now overwhelming. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. I answered, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. The voice on the other end was calm, almost unnervingly so. "Do you like soup?" I leaned back in my chair, letting my lips curl into a wicked smile. The weight of the decision I made was no longer heavy. It felt like resolve, a cold, calculated resolve. "Oh yes," I said, my voice low but steady, a faint hint of satisfaction slipping through. "And I'd like to order 4 bowls of it." The line went silent for a moment before the person on the other end chuckled softly. They provided no details, no instructions, just confirmation that things were in motion. A few hours later, I found myself standing in line at the grocery store. My hand idly pushed the cart forward as my eyes scanned the shelves, though I barely registered what I was looking at. My thoughts were elsewhere, running through every scenario, every step that might follow. It was then that I noticed him, a man I didn't recognize, walking straight toward me, his expression blank, his movements deliberate. He didn't say a word. Word as he handed me a phone, an older model cheap disposable. I took it without hesitation, my fingers curling around the cold plastic as he turned and walked away, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. I stared at the device for a moment before it buzzed in my hand. I answered, bringing it to my ear. Orin, the voice said, smooth and calm. Speaking, I replied evenly. What followed was a short conversation, curt and efficient. No names, no unnecessary words, just instructions delivered in a tone that carried both authority and finality. When the call, as I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket and exited the store, the cool, quiet air enveloped me. The only sound was the gentle hum of the street lights. I paused for a moment, allowing the evening to wrap around me before stepping off the curb, driven by a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. There was no turning back now. Brody Lee adjusted the cuff of his tailored suit while his Maybach glided through the bustling streets. Inside the luxury car, the city noise faded to a whisper, the faint hum of the engine a soothing reminder of his success as he scrolled through emails on his phone, distracted as the vehicle turned a corner into a quieter stretch of road. Suddenly his car jolted to a stop. Brody looked up, startled to see a van skidding to a halt in front of him, blocking his path. Before he could process what was happening, the doors of the van swung open and 3 men jumped out, their faces hidden by ski masks. Their movements were sharp and efficient, hands gripping firearms that gleamed under the late afternoon sun. Brody's breath caught in his throat, his driver instinctively. He reached for the door, but one of the men raised his weapon and barked, "Stay put." Another figure moved to Brody's side of the car, flinging the door open. "Out now," the man growled, his voice cold and mechanical. Brody hesitated for a split second, his mind racing for options, but the glint of the gun pressed against his side forced him to comply. He stepped out onto the pavement, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Move," the man ordered, shoving Brody toward the van. He stumbled but regained his footing, his pulse thundering in his ears as he was pushed into the rear of the van. The pungent aroma of oil and sweat enveloped him as the door slammed shut, plunging him into darkness. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped away. Brody remained motionless, struggling to control his breathing while his mind raced with questions. Who were these men, and what did they want? Later that evening, Brenda Lee found herself in her opulent living room, the soft glow of a crystal chandelier casting a warm light throughout the space. She sipped a glass of wine, attempting to dispel the unease that had lingered all day. Brody had neither called nor texted, and, though it wasn't unusual for him to be late, something felt off. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, interrupting her thoughts. She picked it up and frowned at the unfamiliar number on the screen. For a moment, she debated letting it go to voicemail, but instinct nudged her to answer. "Hello," she said cautiously. "Mrs. Lee," a cold, detached voice responded. "We have your husband." Brenda's heart stopped. "What? Who is this? What's going on?" "You'll find out soon enough," the voice replied, unbothered by her panic. "Here's what matters. We want $20 million if you want." Brody was back, alive, and the message was clear. Deliver it. No police, no games, or face dire consequences. Brenda gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles turning white. "Wait, please let me speak to him. How do I know he's alive?" But the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her hand trembling as the gravity of the situation sank in. Without hesitation, Brenda called the police, her voice frantic as she relayed the chilling details of the call. Officers were dispatched to her home, and the investigation commenced. News of Brody's kidnapping spread like wildfire. Within hours, whispers reached Melissa, who was lounging in her apartment, scrolling through her phone. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message from an acquaintance. "Brody's been taken, demanding $20 million ransom." Panic surged through her. She grabbed her phone and quickly dialed a number she never thought she would call in desperation. The line rang twice before Orion answered. "Hello." His voice was calm, neutral, as though he had just received a call that might change everything. Melissa wasted no time. "Are you behind this? Did you have something to do with Brody's kidnapping?" Orion leaned back in his chair, maintaining a steady voice despite the storm he could envision brewing on her end. "I don't know anything about it," he said, his tone flat and untroubled. "I'm still at my mother's place, remember?" The lie flowed from his lips effortlessly, as smooth as silk. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind, ready for her inevitable suspicion. Melissa's voice cracked, her anger intertwined with fear. "Don't play games with me, or I." Brody's disappearance occurred right after that scene at the bar. "This isn't a coincidence." Orion chuckled softly, a calculated sound meant to unsettle her. "If you're so sure, maybe you should focus on finding Brody instead of wasting time blaming me." "Good luck, Melissa." Before she could retort, he ended the call, placing his phone face down on the table. For a brief moment, he allowed himself a small, grim smile. Everything was unfolding as planned, but he knew this was just the beginning. 2 days later, Jason McDonald was in the middle of his usual workout at the gym, the clinking of weights and the hum of. As the treadmills created a familiar backdrop between sets, he glanced up and noticed a homeless man standing outside, staring through the glass. The man's gaze was uncomfortably intense, fixed on the gym-goers as if he were observing them like specimens. Jason frowned as he saw some of the women inside exchange uneasy glances, shifting nervously under the man's unrelenting stare. His instincts kicked in. Something wasn't right. The situation escalated when the man pressed his face against the glass, smearing it with dirt and condensation, then began licking the pane. The act was grotesque, drawing gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Inside, Jason felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, his protective nature taking over. "What the hell is this guy's problem?" he muttered under his breath, setting his weights down with a loud clang. Unable to ignore the disturbance, Jason stormed toward the gym's entrance, pushing open the door with enough force to make it rattle. He approached the man, his fists clenched, veins pulsing in his temples. "Hey!" Jason barked, his voice sharp and commanding. "What the hell do you? What do you think you're doing? Get the hell out of here." The homeless man turned his head slightly, but didn't respond. His glazed-over eyes seemed to look right through Jason, as if he were in some kind of trance. Without a word, the man abruptly turned and shuffled away, heading down the narrow alley beside the gym. Jason's jaw tightened. He wasn't the kind of guy to let something like this slide without a second thought. He followed the man's footsteps, heavy and deliberate. The alley was dimly lit, its walls stained with graffiti, and the smell of damp concrete hung in the air. Lingering in the air, Jason rounded the corner, the homeless man still just ahead, moving at a deliberate pace. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Jason shouted, his voice echoing in the confined space. "You can't just—" His words were cut off when he suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his head. Before he could react, strong arms grabbed him, lifting him off the ground. "What the—" Jason struggled, his muscles straining, but it was no use. He was quickly overpowered. A van screeched to a stop nearby, its side door sliding open. Jason was shoved inside with brutal force. Efficiency marked the moment as the door slammed shut behind him, and the van sped away, its tires screeching into the night, leaving only silence and a trail of unanswered questions. Back at the gym, no one had noticed Jason's departure from the alley. The unsettling encounter with the homeless man was destined to morph into a chilling mystery. For now, an eerie sense of unease lingered in the air. Melissa's hand trembled as she gripped the phone, her voice quivering as she spoke. "Richard, you don't understand. I just know it's Orion. He's HEK doing something. Brody's gone, Jason's gone, and now you're the only one left." Richard, who had been listening with his usual calm, suddenly interrupted her. His tone shifted, sharp and alert. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through her panic like a knife. "Do you smell that?" Melissa froze mid-sentence, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Smell what?" she asked, her voice edged with fear. Richard sniffed the air, his movements slow and deliberate. "Something metallic, almost sweet. It's faint, but—" Before he could finish, Melissa's vision began to swim, her grip on the phone slackening. As a wave of dizziness enveloped her, the room appeared to tilt, the edges of her vision fading to darkness. "Richard," she managed to whisper, her voice barely rising above a breath. "I don't feel." Her knees buckled, and she collapsed forward onto the counter, the phone slipping from her grasp and clattering to the floor across the room. Richard staggered, gripping the edge of the table for support, but soon his legs gave way beneath him. He fell heavily, his body crumpling into an unconscious heap on the tiled floor. The house descended into silence. save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Melissa's phone vibrating on the ground unanswered. A subtle chemical scent lingered in the air, invisible and insidious, leaving no trace of what had just unfolded or who might be behind it. The two masked figures slipped into the room like shadows, their movements precise and silent. The taller one, broad-shouldered and commanding, scanned the scene with a clinical detachment. His eyes lingered on Richard for a moment before he muttered. The Russian guy said, "It would be odorless. Perhaps this one's sense of smell is sharper than most." The shorter man, wiry and quick, crouched beside Melissa, tilting his head as he examined her unconscious form. His lips curled into a smirk. Makes sense, doesn't it? He's a chef, probably trained to catch subtle scents. But it doesn't matter now. The job's done. Both worms are down. The taller man grunted in agreement and moved swiftly, gripping Rich's limp body with ease. His partner followed suit, lifting Melissa with practiced efficiency. There was no hesitation, no inefficient movements as they operated. The shorter man couldn't help but let out a low, amused laugh. One would assume that individuals would grasp the importance of choosing their company wisely, but alas, their misfortune translates to our earnings. The taller one shot him a cautionary look. Stay focused, we have a timeline. With a nod, the shorter man dragged Melissa toward the exit, his partner pulling Richard along. They moved in perfect synchronization, securing the unconscious duo in the back of a waiting van. The engine rumbled to life, and the van vanished into the darkness, leaving the house shrouded in silence. An oppressive silence enveloped me. Everything remained eerily undisturbed, as if the scene had been nothing more than a ghostly mirage, leaving no clue as to what had just transpired or where Richard and Melissa were being taken. 3 days later, I stepped onto a plane bound for Los Cabos International Airport. The low hum of the engines buzzed in my ears as I sank into my seat, staring out the window without really seeing anything. My thoughts were consumed by what lay ahead, the weight of my decisions pressing down like an invisible hand on my chest. Leaving behind the chaos of the city, I stepped into a different world, one ruled by power, control, and cold efficiency. When the plane touched down, a sleek black car awaited me on the tarmac. Without hesitation, I strode toward it and climbed into the back seat. The driver, a stone-faced man exuding authority, remained silent as the car surged forward, navigating the winding roads that seemed to lead deeper into nowhere. After what felt like an eternity, the driver finally broke the silence. "The boss asked me to give you." He held up a small black mask, his tone measured and respectful, leaving no room for questions, standard protocol. Otherwise, I would have taken care of it myself. I took the mask without a word, my fingers brushing against the smooth fabric. There was no point in asking why. It was clear this wasn't negotiable. Slowly, I slid the mask over my head. The world around me disappeared into absolute darkness, as if I had been swallowed by a void. The silence felt heavier now, more deliberate. With my vision gone, my other senses heightened. Sharpened, I could feel every bump in the road, hear the faint hum of the tires against the pavement in this darkness. There was no city, no Melissa, no past, just the cold focus on what I had to do next. A few minutes later, the driver signaled for me to take off the mask. As I pulled it away, I was met with the warm, familiar face of Gabriel Lopez. For a moment, we just stood there silently, acknowledging the gravity of what had brought us together. Gabriel's expression was calm, but his eyes held a sharpness that said everything. He gave me a short nod before extending his hand for a firm handshake. "Long time," my friend Gabriel said, a half-smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Too long," I replied, my voice steady, yet carrying an intensity that mirrored the quiet urgency in the air between us. Our eyes met briefly, and without another word, we began walking toward a small, unremarkable building nearby. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint sound of our footsteps echoing in the stillness. The place felt abandoned, hidden from the world. As we reached a narrow staircase descended into darkness, a chill creeping into my chest. The dim light at the bottom did little to soothe my unease. Instead, it heightened the foreboding that grew heavier with each step. The deeper we ventured, the more the weight of the situation pressed down on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay ahead marked a point of no return. As we reached the bottom, the air turned noticeably colder, and a figure materialized from the shadows, clad in an industrial apron. Rubber gloves created an appearance that was both functional and disconcerting. He was short, yet radiated a subtle authority that made it evident he was not to be underestimated. He moved closer and offered his hand, his smile unwavering, almost unnaturally serene. "Hello, my name is Santiago Mesa Lopez." He introduced himself, his voice possessing a detached, clinical quality. "I'm the soup maker, and it's time for your bowl." My eyes drifted to Gabriel, who remained quietly beside me. His mere presence spoke volumes, eliminating the need for words. Santiago's straightforward demeanor was striking. The statement hung in the air, dense with unspoken promises and heavy implications. "My cousin mentioned that you wished to experience it firsthand." Santiago's gaze met mine, and I felt a subtle smile tug at my lips in response. I nodded, a blend of anticipation and steely determination in my expression. There was no turning back. I had come too far, and whatever lay ahead was unavoidable. The course was charted, and all that remained was to see it through. Santiago gestured to his men, instructing them to bring her in. Commanded coldly, moments later, Melissa was pushed into the room. Her hands were bound, and she was blindfolded, her movements stiff with fear. They made her sit at a large dining table, the heavy silence of the room pressing down on her. Santiago and Orion took their seats across from her, their eyes locked onto the woman who had caused so much chaos in Orion's life. Santiago glanced at Orion with a knowing look before turning his attention back to Melissa. "Now," Santiago said, his voice sharp, "we have some matters to discuss." He gestured for one of his men to step forward and remove her blindfold. "Do it," he commanded, his voice steady and commanding. The man complied, pulling the blindfold away from Melissa's eyes. Her gaze darted from one figure to another, and when she spotted Orion sitting across from her, her face momentarily brightened with a flicker of hope. "Orion!" Melissa cried out, desperation lacing her voice as she reached for him. "Please, you have to save me. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Help me." Orion's expression remained impassive, his eyes revealing nothing as he regarded her. Slightest hint of emotion flickered as he met her pleading gaze, yet he held his silence for a moment longer. Finally, he spoke in a low, measured tone. "You don't need me anymore, Melissa," he said. "You've made your choices. Your lovers are all you need now. I'm useless to you. You should have thought about that before." Melissa's face crumpled at his words, and tears began to fall freely. She could only sob in response, her body racked with the weight of his declaration, realizing the depth of her isolation in that moment. Santiago leaned back in his chair, observing the scene unfold. Exchanged a faint smirk, his voice slicing through the silence with a cold, matter-of-fact tone. "You haven't eaten in 4 days," he remarked, a glint of amusement flickering in his eyes. "Time for you to eat." With a brief, sharp command to his men, he ordered, "Bring the food." Moments later, 2 of Santiago's men returned, carrying 3 large bowls of soup, steam rising from them in fragrant swirls. They placed the bowls in front of Melissa, each one more ominous than the last. Santiago leaned forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers as he gestured to the bowls. "This one," he began. He pointed to the first dish, bakut, a Malaysian recipe. The second was bat choy from the Philippines, a hearty noodle soup, and the third, jiru, a traditional Japanese soup made from miso and pork. His eyes narrowed with a mischievous glint. "Eat them all, and tell me how they taste." Melissa, her stomach growling from hunger, hesitated for only a moment before quickly starting to eat. She gulped down the 3 bowls one after another, the flavors rich and surprisingly satisfying. Once she finished, she wiped her mouth and looked up. Up at Santiago, her voice trembled as she spoke. They were tasty, all of them. Santiago's expression remained impassive, yet a flicker of satisfaction danced in his eyes. He leaned back in his chair, a small, wicked smile creeping across his face. "I'm glad you enjoyed them," he said, his tone deepening ominously. "You see, all 3 of those soups had pork as their main meat source, but I ran out of pigs except for the 3 I picked up last week." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle in the air, before his smile morphed into something far more sinister, a grin so wicked, so dark. That revelation could send chills down the spine of even the most sinister. Melissa's eyes widened as the realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. Her body froze, and for a few moments, she was utterly speechless, staring at Orion as if seeking a denial of the unfolding reality. But there was no escaping the truth in Santiago's words. The weight of it all was overwhelming. Unable to contain herself any longer, Melissa's vision blurred, and her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed from the chair, the bile rising in her throat, and without warning, she expelled everything she had inside her. She had consumed the contents of the 3 bowls, creating a nauseating mess that spilled onto the floor. Santiago rose slowly, his eyes fixed on Melissa as she trembled on the ground. He signaled to his men, who promptly approached with a water hose. They began to spray Melissa with cold, harsh water, drenching her and washing away the chaos she had created. Once they finished, Santiago's gaze returned to Melissa, cold and unfeeling. "You think you've had enough?" he asked, his voice now taunting. "I still have one more dish for you. It's called." He leaned in closer, his words laced with malice. "For that, I need you." He stood tall again, and as his men moved to handle the next task, Santiago's tone shifted, becoming darker and more venomous. "I'll make sure that all 4 of your lovers are mixed well," he said, his voice lowering with a chilling certainty. "You all will go to hell together." Orion stood in silence for a moment, his eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before him. Santiago, noticing his cold gaze, gave a slight smirk and leaned closer to Orion. Spoke in a tone that carried an unsettling sympathy. "You might not want to watch any more of this," Santiago said quietly, his words tinged with a dark amusement. It was about to get unpleasant. Orion's expression remained unreadable as he nodded slightly, his hands clenched at his sides. He had already seen enough. Santiago gestured to his men, signaling for Orion to be escorted out of the room. "Take him upstairs," Santiago ordered. "Let him go, he's seen enough." As Orion turned to leave, the sound of the chainsaw roared to life, its engine tearing through the silence. Through the heavy atmosphere, a primal force surged as the room below resonated with the chilling, gut-wrenching screams of Melissa. Her cries of agony and terror reverberated through the walls, each one a haunting reminder of her plight. Orion's heart raced as he climbed the stairs, the horrifying sounds of the chainsaw and Melissa's desperate screams trailing behind him, slicing through the silence like a sharp blade. He maintained a stoic expression, but within him, a tempest brewed. An hour later, Orion found himself on a flight back to the USA. The monotonous hum of the plane and the sterile confines of the cabin did little to quell the turmoil within him. Raging in his mind, he finally arrived at his mother's place, the weight of the past few days settling over him, heavy and suffocating. His son, Daniel, was waiting for him at the door. The young boy looked up with wide, innocent eyes, a smile forming on his face as he ran into Orion's arms. Orion hugged him tightly, trying to push away the horrors he had just witnessed. "Dad, I missed you," Daniel exclaimed in a small voice, a welcome balm to Orion's turbulent thoughts. Orion smiled softly, his voice betraying none of the anguish swirling within. Inside him, he felt the weight of nostalgia. "I missed you too, kiddo. Let's make the most of this time together." Yet, the relief of being back home was fleeting. Within hours, a pair of detectives arrived at his mother's house, asking pointed questions and jotting down notes in their little notepads. They were polite, but an underlying tension hung in the air. "Mr. Orion, we have a few questions about the disappearance of some individuals linked to your wife," one of the detectives, a man named Officer Kelly, said as he took a seat across from Orion. Orion maintained his composure, his mind steeled for the interrogation he anticipated. "I understand, but I was with my mother when they went missing, and I have witnesses to confirm that." Officer Kelly raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "We've already verified your alibi, and it holds up, but we still need to investigate the situation. You're aware that Melissa and her associates are all unaccounted for, correct?" Orion nodded, keeping his demeanor steady. "I don't know anything about that. I haven't been in touch with her. For days, aside from a few calls that lasted less than 30 seconds, I've shared everything I know." The detective pressed further, attempting to connect the dots, but no matter how many angles they explored, there was no way to link him to the disappearances. His alibi was solid, and he hadn't left his mother's house during the crucial time frame. After another round of questioning, Officer Kelly stood up. For now, you're free to go. We'll be in touch if anything changes, but as of now, we can't pin the disappearance on you. Among the four of them, Ori nodded once more, thankful for the brief respite, yet acutely aware that this was far from finished. The detectives departed, leaving a palpable tension in their wake. He exhaled a breath he hadn't known he was holding and turned to Daniel, who had been silently observing the interaction from the living room. The boy smiled, blissfully ignorant of the shadows that had just brushed against them. Orion approached, knelt beside him, and playfully ruffled his hair. Everything's fine, kiddo. You don't need to worry about a thing. Yet, even as he spoke, Ian sensed that it wouldn't be long before the shadows of his past returned. A few months after the interrogation, Orion gradually discovered comfort in the simple routines of daily life with his son, Daniel. The tension that had enveloped him for so long began to dissipate, replaced by the normalcy of parenting and fulfilling his duties. His mother's house felt increasingly like home, and Daniel was flourishing, making significant strides in his studies. It was at one of Daniel's parent-teacher meetings that Orion first encountered Anna, his son's teacher. She was a woman in her early 30s, exuding a calm demeanor and a quiet strength that instantly captured Orion's attention. Her gentle, reassuring presence was palpable, yet there was an intensity in her eyes that hinted at grief and loss. Anna was a widow, having lost her husband, Tom, during a tour of duty in Afghanistan. Tom had been a close friend of Orion. Both men had served together, their camaraderie and trust forged in the fires of war. At the time of Tom's death, she was a young mother, left with her toddler daughter, Mia. The grief she felt was profound, yet she found the strength to move forward, building a stable life for both herself and Mia. When Oren discovered her story, it awakened a deep empathy within him, a silent understanding of the burden of loss he recognized in Anna's eyes during their first brief encounter outside the school. It was a moment that spoke volumes. As Daniel was being picked up, Anna stood at the school gate, engaged in conversation with a few other parents. She greeted Mr. Orion with a soft smile as she approached. I'm Anna, Daniel's teacher. Mr. Orion returned the smile, warmth spreading through him as they shook hands. It's nice to finally meet you in person. Daniel speaks very highly of you. He's a bright kid, Anna replied, a fond smile tugging at her lips. He's been a great addition to the class. Their conversation was brief yet pleasant, and it was during this exchange that Orion, perceiving the subtle quiver in her voice whenever she referenced her late husband, it was an unspoken truth woven into her expressions and the silences that punctuated her sentences. As the months unfolded, their meetings multiplied. Daniel's school events, parent-teacher conferences, and chance encounters at the grocery store blossomed into shared moments of intimacy. Orion felt an undeniable pull towards Anna, captivated by her resilience and fragility. She was a woman who had endured profound sorrow, yet continued to navigate life with grace. Despite everything, she devoted herself entirely to her daughter and her students. One evening, Orion found himself outside the school after picking up Daniel, and Anna was there waiting for her ride home. How's Mia doing? Orion asked casually, leaning against the car as Anna approached. She's doing great, Anna replied with a laugh, though a hint of sadness lingered in her words. She misses her dad every now and then, but she's tough. She's resilient like her mother. Orion smiled, understanding more than she realized. You've done a great job. With her gratitude, Anna replied softly, her eyes meeting his. A moment of silence hung between them, and then, almost impulsively, she added, You know, Daniel talks about you a lot. He thinks the world of you, and I can tell he really enjoys spending time with you. That means a lot, Ian replied, his voice sincere. I'm just trying to do my best by him. Anna smiled warmly. I can see that. A shift in the air occurred, a subtle tension neither acknowledged directly, yet it lingered. Over the next few weeks, their conversations grew deeper. In a more intimate exchange, they shared their individual losses, their journeys, and the lessons gleaned from their struggles. Both had faced the weight of grief, yet managed to persevere, discovering methods to adapt and rebuild. One evening, after dinner with Daniel and Mia, who had quickly formed a close bond, the two sat on the porch, engaging in conversation that stretched into the night. Orion found himself laughing with her, genuinely relishing her presence in a way he hadn't experienced in years. As the evening progressed, he summoned the courage to voice a thought that had been on his mind. Anna. He spoke softly, his voice tinged with hesitation. I really admire you. I think you're an incredible person, and I want you to know you don't have to do this alone. If you ever need someone, I'm here. Anna looked at him, her eyes wide, searching. For a moment, silence enveloped them, the weight of his words lingering in the air. Then, slowly, she smiled. I think I've known that for a while, she replied, her voice low and warm. And I don't want to do it alone either. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, yet it felt like the start of something new, of something genuine, something essential for both of them. Over the following months, their connection deepened, anchored in shared experiences, mutual respect, and an emerging affection. A year went by, and the relationship between Orion and Anna flourished. Their children became closer, their lives weaving together in a manner that felt both natural and reassuring. Orion came to understand that, despite the shadows of their pasts, they had discovered something truly beautiful together, a second chance at love. One afternoon, after a serene family outing, Orion took Anna's hand, gazed into her eyes, and he asked Anna, "Will you marry me?" She blinked, surprised, her heart pounding in her chest. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." A year after they started dating, Orion and Anna were married in a small, intimate ceremony. Daniel and Mia stood by their sides, their hands held tightly together. For the first time in a long while, Orion felt complete. He had found love again, something beautiful that had grown from the ashes of their pasts. Together, they built a new life, one full of hope and possibility, with the understanding that the past has influenced them, but it will not determine their future. Dear listeners, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below, and please remember to like, share, and subscribe.